Good morning, students. This is a short introduction to business ethics. I just want to discuss some of the main aspects of the study of business ethics. First of all, I wanted to say a business is a productive organization, or in other words, an organization whose purpose is to create goods and services for sale, usually for a profit. Business is also an activity to do business. Business ethics, therefore, is understood as the study of all the ethical questions and dimensions of productive organizations and commercial activities. There are many questions that ethicists ask concerning business. For example, does being ethical pay off? Well, but even before that question, we should ask, what does it mean to be ethical in business? As we will see later, there are, in fact, people who argue that in business we implement a different kind of ethics that we normally do in our private lives. Why do people engage in unethical behavior? And how can we stop unethical behavior in business? Like many areas of applied ethics, business ethics draws from many disciplines. For example, political philosophy, economics, psychology, law, and many others. One of the concepts is corporate moral agency. Business ethics can be considered in terms of the moral obligations of agents engaged in business. But who or what exactly is an agent? What about firms? What about corporations, companies? Are these also moral agents and therefore morally responsible as they are in virtue of what they are? Some people argue, some writers argue that firms are morally responsible for what they do, and therefore they should be seen as moral persons because firms have internal decision-making structures through which they cause events to happen and act intentionally. There are two main views about corporate governance. One is firms should be managed in the best interests of shareholders. So the idea is that business managers, business employees should act in their operations for the best interest of the shareholders. These are, in other words, people who have a direct interest in a certain business. Shareholders. This is known as the shareholder primacy theory. A few writers argue for shareholder primacy on deontological grounds. Basically, they say that the firm or the company is managed in the shareholders' interest because they have a duty. They have a duty to them by contract to work, to operate for the best interest of the shareholders. The second view is the stakeholder view, according to which managers should seek to balance the interests of all stakeholders, where a stakeholder is anyone like you and myself who has a stake, or an interest in the firm. One influential approach to business ethics is the approach based on virtue ethical principles. According to this principle, businesses have internal goods achievable only by virtues, like friendliness and compassion and justice and so on. So the good life is achieved in a community, and so according to this view, business, the function and the nature of business is to lead to the flourishing of a particular society. Another approach is deontological approach, or Kantian approach, or Kantian theory of morality, where humanity should be treated always as ends in themselves, not as means to an end. So in other words, rational human beings should never be exploited. And so bad business, unethical business, would violate human dignity. Another approach is the market failures approach, according to which the reason we have a market-based economy instead of a government economy is because markets are more efficient. And now the state corrects many market failures through regulations by setting limits on, for example, pollution, requiring a certain standard of truth in advertising, and so on. Firms interact with consumers by selling all sorts of things, products and services, and therefore business ethics is concerned about all the related issues that arise out of consumers and consumer interaction. One of the main questions is, what should be for sale? Is it whatever people want? Let's give people what they want. Or there should be some regulations. And how do we decide? On what ethical standards do we decide whether selling sex or selling kidneys or cigarettes or tobacco or drugs can't be regarded as moral? Obviously, another big issue is product safety and liability. Some products pose a significant risk of harm to people. When is a product too unsafe to be sold? And for that matter, we have organizations, for example, in the United States, such as the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the Food and Drug Administration, to mention a few. So questions about product safety are a matter of significant debate among ethicists and economists and legal scholars, and therefore very interesting issues in business ethics. Advertising is another issue, because as you probably know, advertisement or advertisements is a very, very sensitive issue, because, well, as you know, these big firms employ psychologists. In order to make their ads very persuasive, and we have to decide in ethics whether there are certain standards, certain limits that these ads should be required to tell their messages to people. I don't have to tell you. You know this. That some ads are very deceitful. For example, just to mention one of the examples. In the 1980s, there was a juice, Beech Nut, that advertised as 100% apple juice when in reality didn't have any apple juice. Another example that comes to mind was a very big issue, I would say probably about 15, maybe 20 years ago, when the shoe brand Skechers advertised a certain model of shoes, sneakers, as being very therapeutic and helpful in losing weight. Well, it didn't go well because the Skechers had to pay a lot of money in damages. They got a class action, a legal suit, because in other words, they were lying about that, or their claim was not substantiated. Well, I mentioned this, so let me skip over this. Another issue is pricing. Business ethicists also wonder and are very concerned about what exactly is the right price for a product. Also, price discrimination, which means that some places, some firms, some businesses, whether it's a coffee shop like Starbucks or Walmart or a Staples, they would charge more to people who are willing to pay more, depending on their location. So in some neighborhoods, the same business might charge more or less for a certain product, and of course there are price gouging where there's a sharp increase in price that takes advantage of people in the in the aftermath of Katrina in New Orleans in 2005, for example. Many retailers charge very high prices for water, gasoline, and other products. There are also issues concerning firms and workers. So there's hiring and firing, issues of pay, the right pay, retribution, meaningful work, and whistleblowing. Now, hiring and firing issues regarding criteria that employers should use in order to hire certain people and fire certain people, hire and fire their employees. When does the use of certain criterion in hire count as discriminatory? Suppose, for example, that white diners prefer to be served by white waiters rather than black waiters. So it might be convenient to the business, to the restaurant or whatever eatery. Now, in this case, race seems job relevant, but it is also discriminatory for a business to hire people of a certain race because it's not relevant for the job. Pay generates more issues, ethical issues. There are two general theories of justice and pay. The agreement view, in other words, the just wage is whatever it is agreed upon amicably by the employer and the employee. And a second view is the contribution view, according to which the just wage for a worker is the wage that reflects his or her contribution to the firm. Another issue, the fourth issue, is meaningful work. If a worker produces for example, some item like a pin all by himself or herself, he or she can make just a few pins per day or whatever other item that we're talking about. But if this worker specializes in a particular task, then together they can make thousands of pins per day. So performing one simple task instead of so I'm talking about, for example, take as an example a chair. A long time ago there were people, craftsmen, and they would build a chair. They would take the wood and build the whole chair. Nowadays you might have big factories that produce chairs, and so their workers, their employees, don't really know how to make a chair. They don't even know what they're making. They're making maybe one component that will be just one of the many components that goes into producing a chair. Consequently, as a result, these employees do not learn anything meaningful, and they will never learn anything meaningful. And as a result, they will be also vulnerable, because you see, an employee like that without any skills can be fired very easily, and by the same token, it's not going to be very easy for such a person to find another job, because he or she does not have any particular skills. So the bottom line is that there's an important ethical question over whether employers have a moral obligation to offer employees meaningful work, or at the very least make sure that their employees do not do any or let's put it the other way around, whether employers have a moral obligation to give their employees meaningful work. Whistleblowing is another issue. I said the fourth one. No, this is the fourth one, I think. Whistleblowing, is it ever justified? And in what situation is it justified? Is it permissible or is it required? After all, an employee, a worker, has a duty of loyalty to his or her employer. And according to some people, it is permissible for an employee to blow the whistle when it will prevent harm to society. So in that sense, an employee has a moral, yes, it has a moral duty toward his or her employer, but at the same time, or some might say there are more important duties towards society. Now, another issue is business firms in society. Some businesses are very powerful. These multi-million, billion corporations are so powerful that they have enormous impact and pull in society by producing goods, providing services, and providing jobs even. So businesses can also impact, consequently, society by trying to solve social problems and by using their resources to influence the state, the laws. One example that comes to mind is Ford automobiles. When Ford was big back in the day, the story goes they pressured society to build more roads. Believe it or not. Why? Because more roads means more cars sold. People have to travel more, and this is one very graphic example of the power of these corporations. And a related issue that we will discuss in a different lecture is corporate social responsibility. Check out my video on my channel for corporate social responsibility. This means that corporate social responsibility is an ethical issue over whether firms, whether businesses should operate in a way that that is beneficial to society, or whether other people say, in fact, they defend the notion that the sole purpose and nature of a business is to make profit. And so if a business does something good for society, very well and good. That's absolutely not their purpose. And of course, on the other hand, there are people who argue that it is unthinkable that a business operates without any regard for society. Now, many businesses support candidates for elections and take political stands. So what does business ethics say about these activities? This is called corporate political activity, which raises obviously many moral questions. One question is whether firms are the right type of entities that should engage in political activity. For example, think about Amazon.com or Walmart. Are corporations just because they're big? Should they get involved in politics? Also, firms being involved in political activity might mean that firms engage in corporate political activity in order to advance their own interests at the expense of their competitors. Let's not forget that many businesses operate across societies, and so these are called multinational or transnational firms. And obviously, like everything else, there are moral issues regarding wages, working conditions in overseas factories. As you probably know, everybody knows, most of the stuff that you wear, that you consume, a lot of the services are produced or done in developing countries where there's poverty. And so there are issues of poverty and environmental degradation, and they're often worse in those countries than in our country. So firms are more powerful in the developing world than in the developed world. Okay, this is the end for now. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.